that postpartum resentment is real, postpartum rage.
How did you deal with the rage part? Because I think, you know...
Laura asking for a friend.
Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Life Uncut. I'm Laura.
I'm Brittany.
Now today's episode feels very timely for me, but secondly, it is something that has been requested so many times over the years. I'm actually surprised we've managed to get 6 years into Life Uncut and not done it yet.
It is unusual, our timing. Like a week before you're about to have your third baby, we decided to do a deep dive into this topic.
Yeah, well, we're talking about postpartum depression. Now, I don't say this because I have any indication or feeling as though it's something that's going to hit me, but we've talked about it quite a bit in terms of getting someone on who's a professional, but also we wanted to not just have a professional on, we wanted to speak to someone who has experienced it themselves. Because it's one thing to talk about an experience from a clinical perspective, and it's a totally different thing to talk about it from someone who's actually lived it and understands it.
So we thought, let's find an overachiever who has done both.
But just to give you a bit of stats around how prevalent it is, postpartum depression, it affects 15 to 20% of Australian women during their first year of birth. Hundreds of thousands of families are affected by this. And I don't know whether I'm probably overstepping here, but I would say that so many women experience it and are not diagnosed because they either don't have the resources, they don't have the understanding or the accessibility to be able to go through diagnosis.
But maybe even a lot of women that are experiencing it that have no idea that they are experiencing it. Like it's really hard. When people have a baby, every single woman, everyone experiences hardship and fatigue and tiredness and feelings of hormones and being overwhelmed and sadness. If we're not speaking about what it means, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a really big misconception that postpartum depression shows up straight away. That if you're going to have it, you have it when your baby is a newborn baby. And so the other experiences that you have maybe slightly down the track of, you know, being a new mum, that could be chopped up to something else. But we're going to get into it today. Look, I'm very excited to introduce who we have on the podcast today, Kat Wyeth. Kat, she's a registered and practicing psychologist, the Senior Psychologist of the Psych Collaborative, and also hosts her own podcast called the Psychology Sister Podcast. Now, we did say she's an overachiever because also experienced postpartum depression after having her little girl. Kat, welcome to the pod.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about such an important topic and one that is really needed.
Are you as excited to talk about your accidentally unfiltered story? Because you
No.
did just say to us, I'm not going to talk about poo because I am a practicing psychologist and I want to be taken seriously. So you dug deep for something else.
It's not even that. To me, it's like, hey, we're going to talk about how depressed you are, but first throw yourself under a bus.
I thought no poo stories today. I'm trying to have a bit of integrity, you know?
Oh, don't. Leave it at the floor.
Yeah, we don't have integrity in this room.
It was actually a couple of months ago. I was in the midst of training for a marathon and I was doing a long run, right? And at the time I was still breastfeeding and I was thinking, okay, I'm trying to time it so that my boobs aren't leaking. And for some stupid reason, upon reflection, I wore just, mull grey, that really light grey.
Oh, yeah.
Which shows
Which goes
everything.
black when it gets wet.
It shows everything. It was a little crop top and just shorts. And anyway, I was out for a long run. It was a pretty long run. It was taking me about 2.5 hours to do. And as I was running, I was like, everyone is so happy today. I'm getting a lot of smiles today. And, this is really nice. Birds are chirping. The sun is out. This is amazing. And as every 5 kilometre progressed, I just remember thinking, why is everyone just giving me these little smiles? And I thought, oh, that's really, really lovely. As it goes on, I start to really notice a bit of a smell. I was like, what is that parmesan smell? Like
Parmesan.
Yeah, it smells like parmesan. Anyway, the last 5Ks I finish and I get in my car and I take, a little selfie to put on Strava for my 3 followers. And I realize as I taken this selfie that one boob has completely leaked.
Oh,
and just one has completely leaked and you can start to see the white. You can start to see the white come out of the one boob.
Oh,
and it's worse because it wasn't 2. 2, I think you could just be like, I'm sweating from my boobs.
Yeah.
So the smiles were sympathetic
It
smiles.
was, yeah. And I got home and I was like, when you drive home in silence and you just think of every single person.
It was all
that
mums, though. It was
Yeah.
all mums. It was all mums being like, we've been
Yeah.
there.
Well, no, it might have also been men being like, ew. I
I
don't
reckon
know.
they wouldn't, unless they're dads,
It was
I reckon
real
they
pity.
wouldn't get it. Like, I've
No,
met,
yeah, I don't think they did get it. I think they just liked it. I think there was like wet t-shirt competition, one boob only.
Just one boob only.
Kat, if it makes you feel any better, I once had this experience where I was at my shop at Tony May and I was serving a customer and I felt something leaking and I looked up and I was like, oh my God, the aircon must be leaking. And I was looking around and this poor man, I looked down, I looked at his face and he was horrified and I was squirting breast milk through my shirt. And like,
that's a powerful titty. If you just gone through the material.
It was squirting through the material and just lactating. And it was like, we were all watching it happen in real time.
But I'm sorry, talk about overachieving. You training for a marathon as well? Like, I don't do that without a baby. I was like, what are you doing, woman?
Oh, I think that's part of the problem. I think, we'll talk about it later, but there's a type of depression called high functioning depression. And I think it looked like I was doing okay.
Right.
And it was probably my way of coping.
Kat's like, I'm running away from the misery.
Yes.
She's like, do you do ultra marathons? Like, how far can I run? 100 kilometers? I'm doing it.
I mean, I find this really interesting because obviously you were already a practicing psychologist at the time, but is it something, your interest in postpartum depression, did it come after experiencing it yourself? Or was it already something that you were pretty well versed in terms of speaking to other mums about it and prescribing medication or helping and, trying to get other people through this period of their lives?
I definitely piqued my interest postpartum. Like when I became a mom, I really understood. I worked a lot with women, particularly in fertility and particularly women who had just become new mothers. That was generally the population that I saw anyway. But it wasn't until postpartum where I was like, oh, I get it. I remember thinking, how is no one screaming from the rooftop how hard this is? I cannot believe that almost every second person in the world goes through something like motherhood. And how is everyone okay with this? Like, this is so hard. This is just incredibly hard. So I think postpartum gave me that, almost that personal humanness side to it. I knew all the clinical, I knew all the symptoms, I knew the risk factors and blah, blah, blah. But I think experiencing it and experiencing the intensity of the depression that I did, I really felt, wow, I really understand how difficult this is. And I think that really helped.
What's the difference between baby blues and depression, like postpartum depression, if there is a difference?
Yeah, there is a difference. So baby blues tends to happen around the 3 days postpartum. So that's when you get a lot of your pregnancy hormones, they drop. So your estrogen and progesterone, they drop. And estrogen and progesterone really help with maintaining your mood, so balancing your mood. So that'll last for about a week or two, the baby blues. And then naturally it tends to level out. Like you might have had that experience.
Yeah, I had it really bad with Lola. I remember sitting on the side of my bed looking at her in her cot, and I think we were day 2. And also, I mean, all the mums will get this, but like the cluster feeding. So you've been awake for 48 hours. You've also just run a marathon, literally, labor. And then you're expected to just keep this human alive, which is the most bizarre experience. And they're going to keep you awake for 48 hours. So you have no time to recover.
You're like, I just want to sleep.
Yeah. We went straight home from the hospital. So didn't have like midwife help or anything like that. And I remember looking at her in her cot. And I was just like, what have we done? We have ruined our lives. And I had this it was just such a clear thought of like, this was a terrible idea. And then, it improved and got better and better and better. But I was like very much hit by the baby blues for the first week and a half, I would say.
Yeah, and it's so overwhelming, isn't it? Particularly with cluster feeding. I remember cluster feeding from like 7 p.m. till 5 a.m. like every
all night. 20
minutes and thinking, oh my God, what have I done? But postpartum depression, I mean, it can start actually in pregnancy and it can, it can develop really anytime within the 2 years actually post having a baby. So you can have later onset postpartum depression, but that's doesn't level out on its own. It's not like, the baby blues, which will eventually just level out. Postpartum depression, it's characterized by just persistent feelings of sadness, emptiness, hopelessness, guilt, and it doesn't go away.
What happens when you say it doesn't go away? What happens if it goes untreated?
So for a lot of women actually, untreated, it leads to, symptoms of, intense burnout. They get exhausted, right? If they're in this state of denial, I'm fine, but then they're not fine. New mums are they're such a vulnerable group, right? But I think they're at one of the highest risks of suicide. And I think that that's really the worst case scenario. So untreated postpartum depression can lead to so many things. Burnout, withdrawal, really those intense depressive symptoms like not wanting to get out of bed. It's going to impact on your ability to bond with your baby, not wanting to leave the house. And, so many new mums feel this guilt of, I'm supposed to be enjoying this, but I'm not. And
It's
so
what I've wanted. It's what
yeah,
I've
it's what
tried
I've
so
wanted.
hard. Yeah.
Or there's so many people that would kill to have a baby.
Yeah.
And, what it creates is in this even bigger cycle of guilt that then it almost shuts you off even more, shuts mum off even more of like, I shouldn't be struggling, I should be happy and I should be enjoying this, which then makes it harder to actually talk about and to even acknowledge.
So how common is it, I guess, to start developing postnatal depression in pregnancy as opposed to after?
It's definitely more common after, but if you have a history of anxiety or depression or mental ill health, you're going to be at risk from day one of conception, right? So you're going to have a much higher chance. I think it's 3 times as likely to develop any kind of prenatal depression or anxiety during. But then after, actually, it's a lot higher. So you're at 40 times more likely to develop postpartum depression with a history of mental ill health. Yeah.
Is it purely hormonal or is it also situational? Because
Like lifestyle.
Yeah, and I don't mean just like lifestyle, but like parenting is so hard. Becoming a new mum for a lot of people, like people don't cope with the intensity of it, the lack of sleep, the going from having freedom to having it impact everything around your relationship. And I think that changes everything in your life, So is it always a hormone related aspect to it, or is it sometimes just completely what it is that you're experiencing in your life?
Such a good question. And I think that's like nature versus nurture is what's happening, neurologically for me with all these hormone shifts versus is it, just happening with my maybe isolation or not feeling supported by your partner, et cetera. It's really both. I think talking about the baby blues, that's the start of the hormonal shifts, the neurological changes in your brain. And then it's exacerbated, blows up if you're more isolated, if you don't have that support system, if you've had a history of mental ill health, you're more likely to experience depression. So just like any mental health disorder, it's usually always a little bit of both.
I think also we underestimate. It's just like, oh, you have a baby, you don't sleep, that's life, get on with it. Having no sleep is literally a form of torture in war. Keeping somebody awake and especially letting them sleep for a tiny amount of time and then bringing them out of it is a form of torture. But all of a sudden we're like, hey, you're just a woman. So like you're just going to do that for however many years. And it's pretty easy to forget that because it is just our norm. But couple that with your intense, the biggest hormone drop that you'll ever experience in your life with torture. Like why? And then we're all like so shocked that the prevalence of depression is so high.
It's what always strikes me as so interesting though is like everyone's experience of motherhood is so different, right? And like firstly, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're listening to it because maybe you've experienced postpartum depression yourself. You are in the trenches, or it's something you want to have the clarity about before going into motherhood. But it's, there's people who experience the worst versions of it, and then there's people who go back for a third. So it's like it's so hard to have all of these conversations because everyone's experience is so different,
Yeah, and I mean that was something we were just talking about with you. If you're going to go back after, we'll get into that, but. Did it take you by surprise when you started to develop it and realize that, okay, this is actually more than baby blues? Did it take you by surprise because you're like, well, I've studied this for so long. I help him with this. I came in armed with the knowledge and everything I needed. I guess that realization of depression, as we know, really doesn't discriminate as much as you can be armed. When was the feeling that you realized, oh, okay, this is more than just being tired and sad?
Yeah, mental ill health does not discriminate, unfortunately. I had all the tools. I knew what to expect and, I did everything I could during pregnancy to try and prepare myself. There was actually one distinct moment. I was actually in a lot of denial for a really long time. I think, not just not coping with it, but also as a psychologist who works in this space, I thought, what is wrong with me that I can't cope with this? I should be able to do this. Why am I failing? Why am I crying every night? Why am I getting so angry? And Delilah was she was about to turn, I think, 11 or 12 months. It was almost her first birthday, and I walked into the shop.
Do you say her name was Delilah?
Her name's Delilah.
Oh my God, same. My daughter's
Yes,
called.
It's a beautiful name. And he looked at her and he said, oh gosh, she's beautiful. How's motherhood? And I just said to him, it's so hard. And I'm not loving it. And it was in that moment where I was like, I couldn't even put on my customer service mask. Like I couldn't even just put on the mask of like, oh, it's great. Yeah, it's great. I had just been so depressed that I was just getting through the day. And I just remember that moment and I just felt so guilty. I just remember thinking there are parents who would kill to have a beautiful, healthy baby. And, you know, what was happening in the Middle East was unfolding, and I had that in the back of my mind as there are so many things going on in the world where mothers are losing their children. And here I am with the support. Here I am with the clinical knowledge. And why aren't I coping? You know, I really felt like I was failing.
But I think it's not uncommon for especially people who go through IVF treatments or who have so desperately wanted it for so long, and then experiencing it, they feel like they're not allowed to have any feelings of, and I'm not saying regret, but like sadness or hardship or any of the other stuff that goes hand in hand with parenting. I think there is this kind of like, you should be grateful and don't speak about the parts you're not grateful for, because it will come across as though maybe you regret it or maybe you were undeserving, like the fertility privilege that's kind of all tied into it.
I had that conversation with someone the other day, literally in the last 5 days, that had gone through IVF a couple of times and they'd finally had their baby, and they would never admit it to anyone else out loud, but they were really struggling, and they're like, it's weird because this is what I wanted for so long. And I had that conversation with them. I was like, maybe you're experiencing something a lot of women experience. Like maybe you need to go and speak to somebody and, you know, because you did want this. And of course it's hard, but yeah, I think it's just that realization of your life is different, but it doesn't mean you can't experience something just because, like, both can be true. Just because you wanted something so badly and just because you paid money for it with IVF and, you know, you had all these failures to get it, that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to simultaneously also mourn the life that you used to have or feel sad. And I guess that is another internal battle and level of guilt that is added on to the throes of the already baby blues and depression.
Yeah.
What are the highest like indicators or risk factors that people might have that would potentially indicate that they could be someone who will go through postpartum depression?
Isolation is a really big one. So mums who are quite isolated, and not just from having people around you, because you can have people around you and still feel really alone. It's mums who don't feel like they can talk about it or can even admit or acknowledge it. So that's a really big risk factor. You know, marginalised communities, culturally diverse communities, people who've had mental ill health before. So they're all really important risk factors. But I also want to acknowledge here that you can have all of those things. You can, you know, be well supported and, you know, have the money and the roof over your head and still really, really struggle.
I had a really interesting appointment recently. So I had to go and have an iron infusion for this pregnancy because my iron was non-existent. And the doctor I was speaking to, the specialist, there's apparently a whole heap of research that's coming out that indicates that women who have incredibly low iron are at a higher risk of postpartum depression as well, which I had no knowledge of. And I mean, it's not something that I think most people would even know. You go, oh, like, I'll be fine. You get through it. But it's so interesting, like the different ways in which they're now finding out can impact a woman past having their baby.
How long after your birth did you experience depression? And then I guess how long did that last for? How long were you struggling for that? Because you have come out the other side now.
Yeah, mostly. I still obviously have my days, which is common for postpartum depression as well. I think that's actually a really common myth, is that once you're through and everything's sunshine and rainbows, but that's not the reality at all. Yeah, so I really noticed symptoms from about 4 months into it, which is actually not a really standard time to experience postpartum depression. Usually for most mothers it happens, you know, within a couple of weeks actually after the baby blues actually just never go away. And yeah, I was saying to you guys just before that it was only a couple of months ago that I really started to wake up without that lump in my throat, without that dread for the day. And I remember one of the first days I woke up without that and I thought, my God, have I died? Is this heaven?
I can breathe.
Yeah, like I heard the birds chirping and I was thinking, wow, you know, and so that was a really nice moment of, oh, this feels nice.
And so that's till your daughter was nearly 2. So that's quite a significant amount of time. Because I think a lot of people think maybe, you know, a couple of months or 6 months, but yours was quite a long
About
time.
18 months, yeah.
What were the signs for you? What did your day-to-day look like that you knew that this was depression? And I say that because a lot of women at home will be thinking about their feelings and their day-to-day and wondering if it is, if it isn't, what did it look like every single day for you?
Yeah, and I think there's such a spectrum of what postpartum depression looks like. Postpartum depression can be not wanting to get out of bed, it's waking up with dread, it's not wanting to bond with your child, it's, struggling to get to work, not having, not doing your self-care activities, not being able to exercise. But it can also look like going to work and putting on a happy face. It can also look like a mother who looks like they're coping. It really, on a deeper level, for me, it was just this intense guilt, this intense fear of failure, of why am I not coping? And every night I remember I'd almost get into bed and I would just be crying most nights. Like I would just be like, why am I not coping? Why am I not okay? What is so wrong with me? I should know this. I should have it together. I've just got to, suck it up.
But the not coping, what did the not coping look like? I don't mean to pry, but I guess understanding of what that actually, how that reflects your bond with your child maybe. Did you have a level of resentment, or did you not want to do things for your child that maybe you knew you should do? Were you distancing yourself, or were you trying to palm it off to your husband, or I guess all of those little feelings? Because I think most people, myself included, we get into bed at night and cry all the time. But what was the connection like through the day with your child?
Yeah, so obviously in my time with her, I felt really tired. I didn't want to connect with her. I had all these ideas of things I think I should be doing. I should be getting out of the house. I should be going to mother's group. I should be going to baby sensory and all those things. And I just didn't have the energy. I just didn't want to. And, I was really mindful not to, be an absent mother, because I know how much attachment and being a present parent is important. But at the same time, I was like, I'm not bonding with you. I'm seeing other mothers describe this love, right? This love of, I just love them so much. And I remember there was a swimming lesson I went to with this mum, just being like, how good is motherhood?
And you were like, totally, it's the best. I fucking love it. Can you take my child home with you?
I have two of them.
And there was, that guilt again of oh my God, why am I not enjoying this? So,
but then did you fake it then? Were you like, I love it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was like, it's the best. But so there's the motherhood part, and then there's a part of your relationships of feeling so resentful for your partner that they can't, that postpartum resentment is real. Postpartum rage is, intense. So your relationships are impacted, and I withdrew from a lot of my relationships because I was so embarrassed and ashamed, and also in denial. I was like, I'm a psychologist, I should know this. Why am I not able to cope?
How did you deal with the rage part? Because I think,
Laura asking for a friend.
No, but it's something that when you are so tired, and I mean, obviously I can't speak to having postpartum depression, but I can definitely speak to feeling to the fucking rage. And it's I'm not saying it's directed at my husband. He's great, but it's just this feeling of being angry, which I think a lot of mums experience, especially when their tank is empty. There's nothing left in it.
Short-tempered, I guess, as well, because you don't have anything left. The wick has been burnt.
Yeah.
So it's smaller things probably set you off quicker than something else.
Yeah, because you're right, no gas in the tank. I think it goes against what I like to call the perfect mother myth. That the perfect mother is gentle and patient and kind and, self-sacrifices. She never gets angry. She's never regretting having children. She's not allowed to be disorganized. And so rage is such a common, and it's a normal response. I think just reminding yourself that your tank is empty, you're allowed to be angry. No wonder you're angry. Anger is a sign of injustice. Anger is your way of coping with this feels really unfair. And it often stems from resentment. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but why isn't my partner doing more? Coping with anger, it is just firstly for so many women, they feel like they're not allowed to be angry. There's this it's kind of a bit messed up, but there's this socialized idea that women shouldn't be angry. And we need to be angry. Anger is normal and healthy. So acknowledging that you're allowed to be angry.
I think that that's an important thing to talk about too. And Laura, I remember, I don't want to speak for you, but I remember the one story that's always stuck with me with Lola, which is Laura's second. But I remember you had just been going through it. You were doing a lot of single parenting because Matt had been on Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars at the
Yeah,
time.
you know the story I'm going to tell.
No, I don't. I just remember that whole period. I remember the Dancing with the Stars period, and I fucking wanted to murder him.
I just remember this one story. You just hadn't slept. You had a newborn. You had a toddler. Matt was away, and I just remember Lola had been, she was an unhappy baby. She was a bit unhealthy, colic or something. She just cried a lot. Yeah. And I remember you just saying, Matt walked in the door after 15 hours and she was screaming and you didn't even say anything. You just thrust her in his arms and you're like, I'm leaving. And you went for a drive because you were like, Ray, you just needed to like.
it was actually the opposite of that. So Matt came home this day and he'd been out and I was not coping. Like this is probably, I mean, for me, my baby blues with Lola extended for quite a while, but she didn't sleep for 10 weeks. She slept only on me and I slept to sleep sitting up in a bed. And then Matt was away working. So I had to do both kids. And it was really hard. And I was working. So it was a time.
How you fucking did
It was
that?
a time. It was a really, really hard time. And how I came out of that and still wanting a third, I don't know.
Well, it took 5 years.
Yeah, I was fucking scarred. I've
You've forgotten. That's
You've blacked it out.
But he came home from training this one day and I was in tears or being upset about something and he was like, I know it's really hard at the moment. And I was like, but you don't know because you're not here. So you don't have any understanding of how hard it is. And I was like, I'm really fucking not coping. And we have a rule in our relationship where we don't swear. Like when we're, usually it's you don't swear at each other, not that you just can't swear in context. And he was like, I don't really feel like now's a good time for you to be swearing. And I was like, you know what? I reckon now's a good time for you to go fuck yourself. And I handed him Lola and I left and I went to my sister's house. And I just remember that 2 hours at my sister's house was probably the most enjoyable 2 hours I'd had in the 6 weeks since Lola had been born. And I came home and the poor guy, Lola, was screaming.
But
I could
even
hear
then,
her
you're
from the
saying
car
the
park.
poor guy. That was your day.
No, I
24
know,
hours ago.
but I could hear her from the car park and I walked inside and he was like, I can't believe you would leave without her being fed. Like I've just been dealing with her screaming for 2 hours. And I was like, honey, I fed her just before you walked in the door. That's what she does all day, all day. And he was like, oh my God, I get it. And he was like he got it as much as he could possibly get at the time. And he like
got it
really,
until the morning when he left.
He got it and then he got me help, he got support because he couldn't physically be there. But it would have ruined our relationship had something not been fixed in that moment.
But you can see why so many relationships don't survive.
Yeah,
like
and
that period.
It's tricky because, I always say, I say to friends who have little babies and who are going through the absolute trenches of their relationship, because it does affect your relationship. Even people have an amazing relationship and have wonderful babies, it still affects your relationship in ways. And I always sort of say, don't make permanent decisions around how you feel about your partner until your kid is 2. I was like, because you will feel lots of feelings towards them and maybe they'll be great and maybe they'll be terrible, but like give it the chance to come good on the other side. And, so many of my friends who have been through it with their partners and with having little kids, their kids are like 4, 5, 6 now and they're back to being amazing. But I think we underestimate how much it really rattles your relationship.
Yeah, it has such a big impact on your relationships, and divorce rates are like the highest when your baby is about to turn.
Yeah, totally.
1.
It's why it's so weird when people are like, our relationship's on the rocks, let's have a Band-Aid baby. I'm like, that's the quickest way to get to the lawyers. Like that is the wrong idea.
How did it impact your relationship?
Oh, it definitely had a really big impact on my relationship because, we were both working, we both ran our own business, we were trying to do it all and we just weren't doing it all together. And I was so resentful. I was like, you don't understand, as much as they try and understand. And they're saying all the right things. Like from a psychological lens, it's like validating and like be like, I understand. It's like
you're like, your emotional intelligence is great, but you don't really
I don't need your freaking logic. Like I don't need
I need a nanny.
Yeah. But yeah, it really impacted us. We even had talks about, separation because we were just so unhappy. But I also knew that wouldn't have made us feel any better. That would not have improved anything. But I was so angry. And I think a part of it on me is I should have reached out for help a lot earlier. Like I was projecting and I can see that now. But when you're in the midst of it, you're so angry because their life doesn't change. Like it does, but not to the same extent that it does for you.
Well, they can still leave when they want. They don't have to physically be tethered to the child to keep it alive.
I remember my husband saying like, I have to go to work. I was like, you get to go to work? Like even just the drive to work. He said, I've got to drive for an hour. And I thought,
like what I wouldn't give.
It's funny how you start fantasizing about things that you would have hated back in the day. Like that's, oh God, guys, I've really forgotten what this period's like.
That's why Kat took up marathon running. She's like, my new hobby
I'm escaping.
is running for 4 hours at a time.
It's so funny. Like even we've got this house down South Coast. It's a 3-hour drive from where we live to get to it. And so many mums go, because we'll take 2 cars when we drive down there because we've got the dog, we've got the kids, we've got luggage, doesn't all fit in one car. And people are like, who takes the kids? And I'm like, usually Matt. And they go, 3 hours in the car by yourself? Like, that's fucking amazing. And I'm like, isn't it crazy that this is what we
Laura's on real estate. She goes, baby, I found a house in Tasmania. I think I'm going to put in for it. How did it affect your husband?
He had some pretty serious mental health, his own challenges, but he didn't feel like he could talk about it because I was in the throes of postpartum depression. Like, I think that fathers and other parents, they may feel really similar. I think that's a really common experience for the partners because they're like, well, the focus is on the mother and looking after her, but who looks after the dad? So yeah, he really struggled, and understandably, my daughter also wasn't a great sleeper. We're up every 90 minutes, and he felt like, I want to help, but I just can't. I don't have the boobs. I don't have that soothing that you have. And biologically, I know that's true, but I was like, but you should, I just wish that you could. So yeah, I think fathers really go under the radar. It's a 1 in 10 chance that a father can be diagnosed with depression, but I actually think it's not screened enough. I think that would be a much higher statistic.
Do they call it postpartum depression for men, or is it just called something else? Because obviously they don't have the hormone changes that go along with that.
Yeah, it's actually called paternal postpartum depression.
Right.
So it's distinct from postpartum depression because that is very, centric around mothers and the hormone shifts. But it's notwithstanding that it is still really real. With any big adjustment, right? Like, that is such a vulnerable time for anyone to go through a big life adjustment. So for fathers, for people who are non-binary, people who don't go down the typical path of conception through IVF, through adoption, that's all really important to talk about. It is and it's unfortunately not really being researched at the moment.
I guess there's I understand it, but there is a level where you're like, can't women just have one thing? Like, we birth the thing. Like, we understand it's a huge life change for men. Of course it is. And of course they're also going to be woken up and have those feelings. But there's a part of it, it's like, of course they need to be looked after. But at the end of the day, it's the woman's body and actually the physiological changes that are attached to it. And
yeah, but I also think that's kind of part of the problem, that mentality, because I do think that a lot of men don't speak about it. And when your partner's had such a personality shift because they're struggling as well, and then you also have a baby waking you up every 90 minutes and you have a wife who's screaming and crying all the time, it's really hard to come home and be the stable person in that environment for potentially years and still show up unaffected. So,
no, I don't disagree with that, but I still stand by just give women one thing. No.
Even boobs.
Yeah, you mentioned to us before we started recording that it's kind of gone in a bit of a cycle for you guys. You've had this time in terms of it being your mental health being at the forefront of the relationship and the conversation, and now your partner's stepped forward and been like, hey, I'm also haven't been coping. And so you kind of pass the baton in terms of the self-care aspect.
Absolutely, because really, I mean, one of you needs to be stable. Unfortunately, it sucks, but one of you does need to step up and be that stable person, particularly for a lot of fathers. They are also the financial, stability as well. And so there's a lot of pressure on fathers. So now, I've gone through therapy and, I feel like I'm at a really good spot now. I almost feel like, of course, I want to support you. Of course, it's your time. Of course, you're allowed to fall apart because you've had to hold it together for a really long time.
Yeah.
What's what characterizes someone who is high functioning with postpartum depression? Because you kind of described yourself as that in the first place. What is the difference?
There's not a lot of narrative around, I mean, it's not an official diagnosis, high functioning postpartum depression, but there is something called high functioning depression. And it actually is at odds with what typical postpartum depression looks like, which is why it's actually really hard to pick up. And a lot of the mums I work with now, I have that in the back of my mind of, you look like you're coping, but actually you're probably not. You're using functionality, being high functioning as a bit of a mask, because really functioning is a way of coping with the loss of control. So, I went back to work at 3 months. I, run a couple of businesses. I was training for a marathon, which, thanks, Britt, you've actually just psychoanalyzing that.
I did in my spare time, yeah.
I was speaking at conferences. I look like I was doing it all. And within my friendship group, I'm the token therapist. So I was supporting friends who were going through postpartum. I was the one that was checking in. They'd get to their kind of baby blue mark and I'd be like, just want to check in to see how you're going, or the 4-month regression. So I felt like I was doing all the things. I actually looked different to what you would see a typical mother going through postpartum looking like. I was getting out of bed. I was doing all the things.
Yeah.
And yet actually I was using that to cope. I was so disconnected on the inside. I was so deeply empty. And I think that went under the radar. That's why I invalidated myself for a really long time.
It is giving Laura Byrne. I am getting characteristics of Laura Byrne. I'm going to have to check on you every week.
Potentially do live in denial, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting too, because maybe for you specifically, on top of like every other feeling that you had and navigating it on your own, you are aground with your job for trauma dumping. Like your job all day is to take on other people's, stresses and depression and problems. What are some of the feelings that women would feel when they're experiencing postpartum depression that they might not have ever felt before in terms of intrusive thoughts or levels of anxiety when they've never had an anxiety attack in their life?
Yeah, intrusive thoughts are a really big one. Intrusive thoughts are just like no other postpartum rage, postpartum depletion, just feeling perpetually exhausted. A lot of body image concerns will come up because, even if you've had a pretty healthy body image, like history body image, pregnancy throws everything out the window, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then this idea to bounce back as well. So, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression and sleep deprivation. You're right, it is such a slow form of torture. And what that can do to your cognitive functioning, it just shuts you off from just being able to cope with daily life. So women who are, high functioning, high achieving, they go from doing it all to just being like, I can't even get the words out. I can't even focus on the shopping list. And that is such a significant change in someone's life. And of course, you're going to experience depression or anxiety from that.
Is there a thing? I mean, we've spoken heaps about postpartum depression, and I'm not sure if this is your field of study as well, but postpartum psychosis.
Yeah.
And what is the difference between the two?
So postpartum psychosis is almost, when we look at it from a spectrum, we've got, postpartum depression there, and postpartum psychosis is where a lot of those symptoms are intensified even further. So it's a signal that postpartum depression likely has gone untreated, but it doesn't necessarily come from postpartum depression on its own. Postpartum psychosis is where, particularly for women who are sleep deprived and who have a history of bipolar and depression, are more likely to experience psychosis. So what that looks like is starting to disconnect from reality. So it can be episodes of hallucinations, it can be, hearing voices, everything that we know about psychosis. It's a total disconnect from reality. And that's really serious.
So frightening.
Really, really scary.
What did social media do for you in this time in terms of, did you find it a place of support or a place that exacerbated the dark feelings that you've got? We've got this comparison culture. You're looking at all the other mums who are turning up and having this perfect life and the perfect bounce back body, and we don't know if it's real. Did you find that to be a really detrimental tool or a helpful tool for you?
Yeah, really detrimental. And a lot of mums that I work with agree. But also, obviously as a psychologist, I follow a lot of psychologist pages, and I think that made it a lot worse as well, because I was following a lot of psychologists who are mums and a lot of attachment pages, and I just kept getting inundated with what's the right way to parent from an attachment framework. I was like, I should know this, right? Like, this is my bread and butter. And I think it made it so much worse for me. I actually just had to learn to disconnect. And actually, I remember one night where, as you do, as you start to go on a journey of self-diagnosis, I was like, Reddit. I just need someone on Reddit to give me permission that it's okay to feel like
Am I the asshole?
Yeah.
I don't like being a mom.
I don't want my kid.
Something I want to talk to you about, and I want to be clear because I don't want you to think as though, I feel like it's a very loaded question, but one thing we don't get to speak about is regret. I think if you make a choice to be a mum, that choice is not one you can take back on. You can't turn around and go, well, that didn't work out for me. I guess I'll put this kid up for adoption, leave it at the foster pound.
It's like my biggest fear.
But it is something that some women experience. And, it doesn't mean that they're not great mums and they can't continue to be good mums, but they didn't find motherhood to be the joy or the self-fulfilling thing that they were expecting it to be all along. Is this something that you have patients present with, and how do you work through these feelings?
Yeah, it's actually really common. It's just not spoken about. In a lot of the work that I do, I often find I need to name it first, because not a lot of clients will put that information forward and let them know that it's okay to feel regret. It doesn't mean that you're a bad mother. It doesn't mean you don't love your child. Often regret is rooted in yearning for what used to be, yearning for flexibility, autonomy, power over your life. And I think motherhood can really impact on those things. So regret's a really, really common feeling with not just postpartum depression, but just in motherhood, in matrescence. It's something that really impacts so many mums, but there is so much taboo around it. Like, how often have you heard someone say, I really regret my kids?
There's a random person that says it in an Instagram post and you're like, are your kids reading that?
It's funny, Laura and I talk about it all the time because I'm on this quest to find out if I should have kids or not. And I teeter all the time. And we have this conversation like off podcasts, like just as friends. And I'm like, I just don't believe I don't think people are talking about it enough. I don't believe there's not more mums out there that regret it. I just know that they don't feel comfortable in talking about it. And exactly what you said, regret doesn't mean you don't love your child. And it doesn't mean, I guess, you even wish you didn't have them. But there is a feeling of like, if I could go back, would I do it again? And a lot of people say no.
Yeah.
And it's just I think it's one of those things, and it's interesting to hear you say it from the other side, like, you know, behind the closed doors, is that a lot of women are feeling it, and it's okay to feel it if you're listening right now.
Yeah.
And because people aren't talking about it, the people that do feel it feel really alone and feel all the guilt and the shame.
And there's already so much guilt and shame around being a mother. I remember I had this moment of, what have I done? You know, do I regret becoming a mum? And you're right, two things can be true. You can love your child. You can, you know, really enjoy the time with them and miss the old life and think, if I went back, would I do things differently? Two things can be true. It's not one or the other.
Yeah.
And I think regret can live with love. Regret can live with bonding and love. And I love this part of me, but I also really miss the part of me that had freedom, you know, that connected with my work life identity, that, you know, wanted to travel. And it's allowing two things to be true, because regret is instantly met with shame, right? I shouldn't be thinking this.
I think the word you just used that I gravitate to, that I like, and I think is really like representative of the experience, but it's autonomy. Like, it's your own autonomy of your body and your life, is because you don't live for you anymore. You don't live for your partner anymore. You live for this child that you need to keep alive, and every decision you make for the rest of your life is for that child. That's a really big weight for somebody to feel when last week they didn't have to feel it. And then all of a sudden you're adapting to the fact that you don't really, in a way, own your time, your life. Well, I'm trying not to be so doom and gloom, but it is. And I think we really I don't want to say undersell it, but I don't think we speak about it enough. And maybe that's a question, like your expectation of motherhood before you went into pregnancy, and the way people talk about it, and the way, you know, the things you read about it. Do you think you were prepared enough when you went into motherhood and you became a mother? Or do you think we're not talking about it in the right way and like actually pulling back the curtain?
Yeah, I definitely was not prepared. And that's saying something for someone who has had a lot of knowledge and, you know, understanding into motherhood. So I can imagine for people who don't have as much understanding into matrescence and motherhood, I think there's this theory of the front stage and the back stage of motherhood. The front stage is this perfect mother, what we present to the world. I'm happy, I'm grateful, I'm appreciative. But then the backstage is this kind of darkness of, I don't feel like I can talk about actually how I'm really feeling, in that I regret having children, or I'm not happy, or I just don't love the newborn bubble, or I don't love this age, and that's so okay.
I also think that the spectrum is so vast, because there are people who have children and they're like, this is what I was put on earth to do and to be. That version of motherhood exists as well. And then there's the version of motherhood where they're like, fuck, that newborn stage was wild bit of gear, but toddlers are great, you know? And I think that it is so varied, people's experience of it, how they show up in motherhood, also the support that they receive, whether they have a dead shit partner who does nothing and they're doing everything, or they have a partner who shows up in parity. Like, all of these things will impact your experience of being a mum. So you're never going to be able to have one conversation or read everybody else's motherhood journeys and be like, I know that if I have kids, I'll regret it. Or I know if I have kids, I'm going to love it, because you just don't know. It's truly something that you will not know the answer to until you do it yourself.
Yeah, and also you might have a baby that sleeps 12 hours a night. Totally. You might have one that's up every 90 minutes or every 60 minutes or whatever else. What are people that might think that they are in the throes of postnatal depression now? What do you suggest they do?
One of my best tips is, if you're asking yourself the question, do I have postpartum depression? That's the sign. You know, because of how layered motherhood is, there's this shame, there's this guilt around not coping. But I think for so many mothers that I speak to, the fact that they are asking, you know, they often say, I don't know, do I have postpartum depression? And I think 9 times out of 10, if they've asked themselves the question, they do have
It's like
it.
if you ask, like, do you think he likes me? He probably doesn't. Like, if you're asking that question.
I always say, if you're Googling, should I break up with him? The answer is yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar. Usually you know the answer.
If you're on Reddit, you know, searching my arsehole, you probably, you know, need to have a chat. But, you know, there's that. And I think it's just the not coping. It's if you're really struggling day to day. And I don't mean as though you're in bed every day. I mean, if you're getting into bed at nighttime and thinking, oh, I'm dreading the next day, or I'm really struggling at the moment. When will this end? Even if you don't meet criteria for postpartum depression, that is still a really important time to reach out. And I always think, and I have this like crazy metaphor in that if I was sitting with a client and they were, sitting across from me and they're saying, I'm really struggling with my body image, I hate my partner, I'm feeling so much rage and I'm feeling suicidal and I'm so angry and I'm so low, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, the red flags would be going off in my mind and, wanting to make sure that they're okay. But as soon as you put this cloak of motherhood on, it's like, oh, well.
It's normal.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. Oh, that sucks.
It's so true.
Yeah.
What are some of the intrusive thoughts that women experience that, your patients experience or tell you about?
Yeah, so intrusive thoughts exist because of what's happening in your mind to try and keep your baby safe. So everything you thought about the world as being safe totally switches when you have a baby. It can be anything, and for a lot of women, it's about baby safety or doing something wrong. So
All the time. I don't know a single mum who doesn't have intrusive thoughts.
No.
I was laying in bed the other day, literally just laying in bed, and then I was thinking it was nighttime and my kids are safe in their own beds. And I was thinking about the kids going, because they sometimes play at the front of our house, which is very safe area. It's locked off. But I was like, but if the gate was open and Lola went down to the street and then a soccer ball went out and then I just had this visual image of her being hit by a car and then couldn't stop thinking about Lola being hit by a car. And like, this is the thing. You just have this loop cycle of fucking an absolute catastrophe. And it's because now I will never let them play out the front because now I've just created this thing in my head where Lola's going to get hit by a car. Yeah. Like, it's crazy.
And it just came from nowhere. You just in bed.
I was literally in bed, not thinking about anything. And then I thought of a soccer ball and then I thought 2 seconds later I'm watching this play on loop in my head. And it's like traumatizing.
Yeah, because you're visualizing it.
Yeah. You see it happen.
You see it, yeah.
It's awful.
It is awful. So, and a lot of it tends to be around what if I drop my baby, or what if, I remember when I was walking once, I was like, oh my God, there's so many tree branches up there. And it was windy and I was thinking, oh my God, I could die. She could die. Like all those things that you just put trust in the world, everything comes into question. So anything, it could be accidentally hurting your baby, but even more going to the other end of it where, if you're holding a kitchen knife, you think, what if I accidentally stab my baby? Like really quite intense thoughts. And I really want to remind anyone listening, this is not an indication that it will happen at all, or it's not an indication that you want something to happen. There's this myth that the more I think about it, the more I'm manifesting it. That is not true. It actually is a sign of that what your brain is trying to do is to stop that from happening. It's trying to make you, for example, with a soccer ball, you're trying to stop that from happening and doing everything you can.
And that's obviously like Lola started playing soccer on the weekends. So it's now you're in that next chapter and you're imagining what could happen.
But it also just doesn't stop. That's the thing. I think obviously it's worse when you're a new mum and you have newborn babies. You have those moments where you wake up and you would have been breastfeeding, you put the baby back in the bassinet and you wake up and you're like, where's my baby? And you're like looking in the bed for your kid. Like it's the weirdest feeling. I think most mums have experienced it. And I mean, I guess for some people, like it lessens in intensity, but it never just goes away. You never this is just a whole new worry that exists within your brain.
It just levels up.
Yeah, totally.
So that they've clocked that they've got these feelings, and then do you recommend going straight to a GP? Do you recommend going to see a therapist or a psychologist? What's your steps?
I think first port of call GP is fantastic. If you have a really supportive GP, they'll be really understanding. They'll probably do some screeners with you and ask you some questions. You can absolutely go to a psychologist. It depends also on, for a lot of mothers, financial situations can be really a barrier to accessing support. So the Gidget Foundation and Panda organisation, they offer free counselling, which is fantastic. So that's always a step you can take, or even just researching a bit more information. If you don't feel ready to take that step, just researching and starting to get, your head around what is it and this could be me. But yeah, your GP can give you your referral for a psychologist. You can get rebates from that as well.
And I guess just maybe making sure those people around you know that you're struggling or that you need help, like your friends or your family or your partner, especially if you don't have the resources to go and maybe seek help immediately. Obviously a GP, you absolutely can, that you can go to a free GP. But I guess just making sure somebody in your life knows.
And just letting people in is often the hardest, because letting people in might be acknowledging that I'm not coping, and for so many mums that feels really hard to come to terms with. And also asking them to do some research too can be really helpful.
How do you feel about, and I guess what's the information or the stats behind medication when you are in the throes of that? Can you be taking medication when you're breastfeeding? Talk to us about that option for people that might need more help than just therapy and support.
Yeah, medication is a wonderful tool to have in your toolkit. It shouldn't be used for everything. I think in conjunction with lifestyle and therapy and supports, it's wonderful. There are certainly some medications you can take while breastfeeding, and your doctor will be able to help you out with that, because you also might be taking other medications that, have an interplay there. So, and it's really important that you do, and your doctor will likely have a conversation with you about medication.
I think as well, in terms of not just the routes to take, but like the things that you need from a self-preservation perspective. I think we put a lot of pressures on ourselves, like the breastfeeding conversation. People put so much pressure on themselves to breastfeed because it's, it's what's going to be best for the baby. But if it's not best for you and your mental health, I kind of think like make decisions that are also best holistically for both of you. And for Matt and I personally, I know that the best decision I made was when Lola went onto a bottle, and she went onto a bottle early. And it was because I wasn't the one having to do everything. Yeah, well, I wasn't coping. And it meant in the nighttime, Matt was feeding her, and it was just a sacrifice that we made. And it made such a massive difference to me. And then there was a part of me that was like, but don't tell anyone, because then people would judge that you took her off, you put her on a bottle at 2.5 months. And I was like, well, I literally would not have been able to cope otherwise. So
no, and it makes you a better parent for the rest of your parenting.
And for my other kid as well. That
yeah,
was
what one? What's her name?
Yeah, totally. I mean, also, like, do whatever you want. I'm not here telling people how they should or shouldn't, like, take care of their kids. But for me, it was something that massively helped. And I think it probably prevented things from getting a lot worse for me for the trajectory that I was on with Lola.
And so I guess now, just to finish it, you said you were like, for want of a better word, mostly out the other side where the sun is shining again and you're hearing the birds again and you feel happier, but not quite. You still have your down days. I'm assuming that is very common when you come out of something like this. It's not like you're like, I woke up and I'm good again.
Yeah, really, really common, because a lot of the narrative online, actually, I was researching only a couple of months ago for a client. A lot of the narrative is I'm through it and everything's back to normal, and now I know what to do for my next pregnancy. And that is not the case at all. You may be at risk for, if you were to have another child, for developing postnatal depression, and you're still going to have your days. You're still going to have your days of dread and shame and guilt of, I'm not doing the right thing, I'm not feeding well, or they're not sleeping well. And I just really want to remind anyone listening that even if you are having more good days, that's fantastic. But just because you might have a bad day or a couple of bad days or a week or whatever, that is a really normal response to the intense struggles of motherhood. That is actually a really understandable response for everything you've been through. And your body has been through like a turbulent roller coaster that we just expect to be back to normal. To get back to my level of normal sleep, I don't know what you call it, sleep debt, like I was in a lot of sleep debt. It's almost it's been 2 months now and I'm still not out of that sleep debt yet.
I mean, the last thing I kind of want to say on this is when you have really little kids and you haven't kind of, I'm talking newborn and under 2, you feel like it's going to be that state of motherhood forever. Like when you're in the trenches feel like they never, ever, ever are going to you're never going to climb out of them. And I think now looking back on that experience for myself, if you'd asked me after Lola whether we would have a third, I would have said no fucking way.
It's
too hard. No fucking way. But now we have a 6-year-old and a almost 5-year-old, and parenting is so easy. So we're here to fuck it up again. But it's really hard to see how the different phases are going to be. And every time I see anything on social media, like I saw a thing the other day and it got me so riled up. And it was like a new mum who had a baby, and she's like, when you say to a toddler mum, like, oh, this is really hard, and they're like, well, wait until they're toddlers. And I'm like, no, like for me, nothing was harder than newborn phase. Yeah. Nothing was harder than having little babies. And of course, parenting is still challenging at different ages. I'm not discrediting anyone's experience around parenting, but my experience parenting a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old is a shit ton easier than parenting a newborn baby. And or even like not even newborn, like 6 months or 4 months going through that regression. And I think like whatever stage of it that you're in, it's an impermanent stage as well. And knowing that is very good for your sense of self. Yeah. Like, if this is terrible, it's not going to be like this forever.
Yeah. I know, and I feel like we're getting even deeper now, but I just think those people can't ever know that because they haven't done it yet. So it's like, I feel like when someone is saying, I just feel like I'll never get out of this, I think the answer is to just listen.
Yes.
Because you can say to them, it'll get better. But for them, they're so deep in
but the reason why I say it is because I feel like the narrative online is like motherhood doesn't get any easier. It just gets harder. You think this is
just
hard.
different problem.
When they're big, when, like little people, little problems, big kids, big problems. It's like, it's not like, let's stop terrorizing motherhood. It's not always, I know there's hard parts to it, but it's not always that version. And like you can come out through the other side and be like, oh my God, that postpartum depression, that parenting of small children was horrifying. And now it's feeling fun. And I guess that it's like, I don't want to lean into the fear that it's just always going to be in a certain static space.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to the fact that like no parenting journey is ever going to be the same as somebody else's, because there are people's whose the newborn stage is the best ever because they've got a problem child.
Yeah.
Or something's happened, like
Totally.
Like their
They've got
child
an 18-year-old
is
drug addict and they're like, fuck.
Their child is not easier when it's running around or when it can speak, So it's like, I guess it's just this, it comes back to, it seems so basic, but like, don't be judging another parent's journey or feelings.
Yeah, and just on that, I think that's a really good reminder when you're talking to someone who might be experiencing postpartum depression or just someone who's struggling, which is going to be 100% of mothers, right? Is that there's this common narrative. I remember feeling like this of, someone saying, oh, me too, that happened to me. And while it was actually really like they were trying to be really helpful, I immediately felt like, well, then maybe I shouldn't be struggling. They'd say like, oh, my baby struggled as well, or I struggled with feeding. And I thought,
Does everyone do this? Yeah.
Yeah, then I felt instantly invalidated because I was like, oh, then what am I getting upset about? And so it's coming from a really beautiful place. So what I really recommend is if you are talking to someone who's struggling is try not to offer those stories or anecdotes unless it's asked for. Try and just be that space for them. And it is helpful sometimes. I'm not minimizing that, but wait until they ask, how did you go with this or did you experience this? Because for the most part, what people want to hear, what mothers want to hear is like, that really sucks and I'm so sorry this is happening. Like, just tell me about it. Like that is one of the most powerful things you can do is just hold space and sit. I always say sit on the ledge with them. They're sitting on the ledge, just sit down.
Pull them off.
Sit down next to them and slowly
back away slowly from the ledge.
Hug them.
Yeah, let's hug over here.
Kat, thanks so much for coming and being part of the podcast. Like I said, it's a conversation that we've been wanting to have for ages. And we weren't really sure how to do it, whether we had someone on at the start that was like comes from the clinical side and then someone on the end who comes from the personal experience side.
We just thought if we waited because we're like, Laura's going to keep having kids. Eventually she'll have depression and then she can talk about it from her. But she just hasn't got there yet.
Subtle foreshadowing.
Yeah. Thanks, Kat. We really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're so welcome. I have this quote of shame dies when stories are told in safe places. So I really appreciate you taking the time to have a space that is so safe to do so and really funny as well. So thank you.
And we will put, Kat mentioned some links that are some free support places that you can go to. We're going to put all of those in our show notes and any other links to things that we think could help you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.